Upgrading the clock spring of the MX-5 NB Miata? Why would you do it? What benefit would it bring? If you're perfectly happy with the horn and airbag as the only functionality in the steering wheel, then this video might not be for you, unless you seek to understand how a clock spring works, because I will show that as well. Some manufacturers have gone over the top with buttons on the steering wheel, but there is a middle ground. From the NC generation onward, it's common to have at least audio controls on the steering wheel, so why not have them on an NB? You will also learn which clock spring to use for the upgrade and how to interface it with the car without cutting into the original wiring loom. That might be useful when you would like to undo this modification in the future. In an earlier video, I already showed you these buttons that can be used on the NB steering wheel. The audio controls from the Mazda 323F and the cruise control buttons from the Mazda Protégé can be used without a clock spring upgrade. They can, however, be difficult to find, therefore we need to look at alternatives. The alternatives that provide audio controls and in some cases also cruise control buttons are the steering wheels from the MX-5 NB Miata, the RX-8, Mazda 6 and CX-7. If you like one of those steering wheels, the clock spring upgrade is mandatory. Make sure to disconnect the negative battery cable before you remove the airbag, steering wheel and clock spring. Any changes you make are at your own risk. By the way, for my project I have chosen the Mazda 6 steering wheel. Let's look at some clock springs in more detail. When you remove the airbag and steering wheel from a Mazda MX-5 NB Miata, this is basically what you're looking at. You have the clock spring and the combination switch. Normally you would have 3 screws in here to hold the two of them together, and these are mounted on the steering column. In case we want to have a different steering wheel, a steering wheel with more signals coming from the steering wheel, more wires because of audio controls, cruise control buttons, illumination and the horn, then we need more wires that can go through the clock spring from this side to the opposite side, to the wiring loom of the car. In order to do so, we would then remove this clock spring and replace it for the clock spring from, for example, the Mazda 6, which is a natural fit. Yeah, it has the same dimensions, inner diameter, but also the same mounting points, so you can just screw this on with those 3 screws, and then you go from 4 pins in the connector to 8 pins in the connector, and that's what we need, because the steering wheel on the Mazda 6 or on the MX-5 NB Miata or on the RX-8, which are all candidates for a richer steering wheel, they need a clock spring like this. In this case we have a clock spring from a Mazda 6 with 2 connectors for a dual stage airbag, but also later when Mazda 6 got a single stage airbag, they simply tucked away the orange connector and used the yellow one. And basically 2 wires is sufficient. But it's important to know that this clock spring is a direct bolt-on for the combination switch of the Mazda MX-5 NB Miata. These are 2 clock springs for the Mazda MX-5 NB Miata. The purpose of the clock spring is to connect the wiring inside the steering wheel with the wiring of the car in such a way that when you turn the steering wheel like so, then the wiring should stay intact and the connection should stay intact. So this part can rotate, the part on the other side is stationary because it's connected to the combination switch on the steering column. When we look at the connectors, we see we have one connector for the airbag and another connector with room for 4 pins, but only one of those 4 pins is used for a wire for the horn. The same connectors we see on the other side. This is where the airbag will go, and this is where a similar connector as the one on the front will come out with a wire for the horn. When we look at the internals of such a clock spring, that's when we can understand how they do it because in principle what you want to be able to do is make sure that the connection stays between the front and the back of the clock spring. So comparable to the spring of a traditional clock, a mechanical clock, where you would wind up the spring to provide the clock with energy when it slowly unwinds, it's the same in this case. So when we look at the cable that connects the front and the back of the clock spring, it's inside this housing, 4 pins for the small connector, 2 pins for the larger airbag connector. So when we turn the steering wheel, what you see is that in this case we are winding up the cable up to the point where it becomes harder for the cable to wind up. If you go beyond this point, you will break the cable. If we turn the steering wheel in the other direction, you can see that the cable unwinds within the housing, again up to a point where it can no longer be further unwound and will block. So if you push beyond that limit, then you will also break the cable. Therefore, it is important that if you look at the total range of rotation, it's about 5.5 turns. So the center is in 2 3/4 of a turn. Therefore, Mazda also indicates on the yellow stickers on the front of the clock spring that you should center it before you mount it onto the steering column. In order to do that, you need to do 2 3/4 of a turn to find the center. So this is 1, 2 3/4. So this would be about the position where you would want the clock spring to sit. Then you know I can turn it 2 3/4 of a turn to the right and 2 3/4 turn to the left without damaging the cable in this clock spring. And that's how it works. For the additional functions on the steering wheel, I decided to go with a Mazda 6 clock spring. Now we need to compare that with the original clock spring from the Mazda MX-5 NB Miata, because the connectors are quite different. We have this quite bulky airbag connector on the NB compared to these small airbag connectors on the Mazda 6. For the additional functions, there's a 4-pin connector on the original clock spring, and on the wiring loom of the car you will find this connector, which basically only has one wire, and that is for the horn. So from within the steering wheel there's the same connector. It will connect the horn to the front of the clock spring, and then on the back of the clock spring you will see that this connector also fits on the back, and that is how the wiring loom of the car is connected to the clock spring. Then for the airbag you will see this type of connector on the wiring loom. That's our starting point. This is what we have on the wiring loom of the car, and this is what we have on the wiring loom of the car. That's a starting point for our interface. When we compare that to what we can find on the Mazda 6, or in this case, this piece comes from the steering wheel of a Mazda MX-5 NB Miata. This is an 8-pin connector, of which 7 wires are used. This will connect the steering wheel to the clock spring in this way, but on the back of this clock spring you will find the same connector on the wiring loom of the car that will go in like this. Then there's one more spot remaining, and that is for a connector like this one. You will find this on the wiring loom of the car in a Mazda 6, and it connects like this to the clock spring. So we need to make sure that we have a connector like this to connect the clock spring to the car, and we need to have a connector like this to connect the additional functions to the car. For that purpose, I've been looking for the connector that fits this one, and you will find this connector, this airbag connector, on the driver airbag and on the passenger airbag of the Mazda MX-5 NB Miata. If you find a car of which the airbags are deployed, then you can use either the one from the passenger side or from the one in the steering wheel. That needed to be interfaced with the other connector. In this case, I found a connector with only 2 wires because the Mazda 6 was one with a single stage airbag. I connected the two, and this is my adapter for the car, because I will use this connector on the side of the wiring loom of the car. We'll hook it up with this, like so, with this connector, and then connect that to the back of the clock spring, like so. And that will create the link from the airbag perspective. So for the additional functions, we need to go from here to here. I have a connector from the wiring loom of a Mazda 6 and found also a male connector that will allow me to reuse the pin that's in the horn connector. And this one is from the same family of connectors, as you can see. This one came from the door mirror of a Mazda 6. It has 2 different types of terminals in the connector, so it's 8 pins in total, but only the 4 in the center have the same size as the terminals on the wires, like the one in the horn. But this combination, you can find that on the door mirror of a Mazda 6. And this will allow me to create an interface. The 2 wires that I already have in this plug are intended for the radio. So I've prepared this cable with 2 terminals that can go into the connector of the radio for pins N and P, and they come back towards the steering column, can be connected with this male connector, and then I only need to add the wire that comes from the horn that also fits into this connector. Then those 3 wires go towards the clock spring, which means that I still have an additional 4 wires to connect. These 2 are for the cruise control. These 2 are for the interior illumination. So at night the buttons on the steering wheel will be illuminated. The purple or violet with white is for the horn, and the other 2 are for the audio signals. When you decide to install one of the suggested steering wheels, you also need an airbag that fits. It is important to understand the difference between a single stage airbag and a dual stage airbag. In some cases, both options have been used and are available from donor cars. If you only want audio controls, choose the NC or RX-8 steering wheel. When looking at the airbag, we see that the NB generation uses a single stage airbag. Initially on the Mazda 6, they used a dual stage airbag. So depending on the impact of a collision, the system would decide which part to deploy first. But there were 2 parts to choose from, and then the second part would also be deployed, but shortly after. Later on that changed again after the facelift, and then Mazda went to a single stage airbag again. They still used the same clock spring with the 2 connectors, only the yellow one was hooked up and then the orange one was stored in this plastic clip. So when considering to use the Mazda 6 steering wheel, I would recommend to go for the single stage airbag, because the NB generation also has the single stage airbag. So there can be no confusion for the system. I hope you found this video helpful. My project car currently has the Mazda 6 steering wheel, clock spring and the single stage airbag. The audio controls work as intended. I still need to wire up the illumination for the buttons in the steering wheel and the cruise control, which is part of the next step in the experiment to get the cruise control working. There are no warning lights in the dashboard for the airbag system, so from an airbag system perspective, everything's fine at the moment. But remember, any changes, any modifications that you do to your car, you do at your own risk. I've shown you how I do it, but cannot take any responsibility for your actions. So be safe. If you need any additional clarification, please let me know. Any feedback is welcome, so please post that in the comment section below. If you liked this video, then please give the thumbs up, press the like button, and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks for watching MX-5 Info.